You ever seen that movie Top Gun?
Yeah.
You know the scene where Maverick is like right up on that MiG?
Oh, yeah.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Well, think about that. But like 100 years ago, World War I,
Oh, wow.
those guys were flying in open cockpits.
Really?
100 miles an hour. Machine guns just jammed in sideways.
Sounds a little more intense than Top Gun.
No kidding. It's a
Yeah.
crazy story of courage, innovation, a whole lot of luck.
So that's what we're looking at today.
That's our deep dive today, the birth of like aerial warfare in World War I.
Okay.
We're going to focus on the American experience.
Cool.
We've got some amazing accounts from the podcast, History That Doesn't Suck.
Awesome.
So in like a little over a decade, aviation went from a dream to a like deadly reality.
Wow.
Think about it. The Wright brothers, they make their first flight at Kitty Hawk in 1903.
Uh-huh.
By 1914, we have armed aircraft fighting in the skies over Europe.
That's crazy. In just 11 years.
That's like going from horse-drawn carriages to the moon landing in a single generation.
Yeah, totally.
It's crazy. And get this, the first documented aerial attack.
Yeah.
It happened before the war even started.
Really?
1911.
Okay.
Italo-Turkish War.
Okay.
This Italian pilot, Lieutenant Giulio Gavati,
Uh-huh.
he drops grenades.
He drops what?
Grenades
Out of a plane.
out of his plane. Just chucking them
Oh, wow.
onto enemy positions.
That's kind of primitive, right?
Yeah, primitive, but a sign of things to come.
Right.
Like, this wasn't just about scouting anymore. This was like, we're going to use aircraft as weapons.
Right. Weaponizing the skies.
Yeah.
So was it just grenades at first? Or did they start using other things?
Well, the Germans, they
They were ahead of the game, right?
yeah, they were way ahead. They had these Zeppelins.
Oh, the Zeppelins.
Remember those?
I remember seeing pictures in, like, history books and stuff.
Yeah, those massive airships. They were originally meant for passengers,
Right.
but they quickly turned them into bombers.
I bet that was scary, seeing those things coming at you.
Oh, absolutely. In those early years,
Yeah.
they were a psychological weapon.
Yeah. Just the size of them.
They bombed cities.
Like what?
Liège in Belgium.
Yeah.
Then Paris, even London.
Wow.
And imagine at that time, most people had never even seen an airplane,
Right.
let alone a giant airship dropping bombs.
It must have seemed like something out of the future.
Yeah, like science fiction.
Right.
But the real dogfights,
Yeah, the ones we picture.
like you see in the movies,
Yeah.
those involved the smaller, more agile aircraft.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's where we see the arms race take place during the war.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like at first, pilots were just carrying pistols and rifles.
Really? Just like handguns.
Yeah, trying to shoot each other while flying.
While flying.
These rickety contraptions.
So I guess they figured out pretty quick they needed something bigger.
Yeah. Enter the machine gun.
Ah, now we're talking.
But here's the problem. How do you put a machine gun on a plane?
Yeah, good point. Especially with the propeller in the front.
Right. Shooting your own propeller blades off is not good.
No, not ideal. But how'd they do it?
Well, the first attempts were kind of risky.
Okay.
There was this French pilot, Roland Garros.
Uh-huh.
He attached steel plates to his propeller blades.
Steel plates to deflect bullets.
Yeah, hoping to deflect any bullets that hit him.
Wow. That's brave.
That's flying by the seat of your pants.
Did it work?
Surprisingly, yeah, it did. For a while.
Really?
He even shot down a few German planes.
Wow.
But then he had to land behind enemy lines.
Oh, no.
They captured his plane.
I bet the Germans were pretty interested in that plane.
Oh, yeah?
So what happened?
Well, that's where this Dutch engineer working for the Germans comes in.
Okay.
Anthony Fokker.
Fokker.
He takes Garros's idea, right,
Mhm.
and perfects it.
Okay.
He develops what's called the interrupter gear.
Interrupter gear. What's that?
Okay, so imagine like a cam on the propeller shaft, right?
Uh-huh.
And it's synced with the machine gun's firing mechanism.
Oh.
So when the propeller blade's in the path of the gun,
Yeah.
the cam stops the gun from firing
Okay.
when the blade is out of the way.
The gun fires.
Gun fires.
So it's like the propeller is a giant timing device.
Exactly. And it gave the Germans a huge advantage.
Right. Because now they can just fire straight ahead.
Through the propeller,
The accuracy.
this period of German air superiority,
Yeah.
it became known as the Fokker Scourge.
The Fokker Scourge.
British pilots were calling themselves Fokker fodder.
Because they were getting shot down so easily.
They were getting picked off left and right.
That's got to be demoralizing.
Oh, for sure.
So what did the Allies do?
They weren't just going to sit back.
Right.
They had to come up with something.
Okay.
They had the Lewis machine gun.
Yeah.
They mounted that above the propeller,
Okay, clever.
on a plane called the Newport 11.
Newport 11.
Yeah.
So they could just fire away.
Yeah. No worries about hitting their own propeller.
Nice. So this whole technology race is going on.
Yeah.
But there were Americans already involved, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even before the U.S. was in the war.
Even before the U.S. entered the war.
And that's where we get to the Lafayette Escadrille.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's hear about it.
The Lafayette Escadrille and the lives of these American pilots fighting for France.
Sounds fascinating.
So these guys, the Lafayette Escadrille, volunteering to fly for France before the U.S. even entered the war. What was the deal?
Well, you got to imagine it's 1916.
Okay.
War is raging in Europe. America is still officially neutral.
Right.
But you got a lot of Americans, especially with French ancestry or ties to France, feeling this like strong sense of duty.
Yeah, they gotta help.
Yeah, they see France as being on the right side of this whole thing.
Defending democracy?
It's defending democracy against tyranny.
It's a lot of idealism, I'm guessing.
For sure.
Adventure, maybe a little proving themselves?
Absolutely. For many of these young men, flying was the ultimate test.
Skill and courage.
Yeah, and plus there was that whole romanticism of it all.
Right. Still the early days of aviation.
Yeah, pilots were seen as heroes.
Knights of the sky.
Exactly.
Top guns of their day.
You could say that.
But it wasn't all glory and fame, right?
Yeah.
What was it really like for a pilot back then?
Think about it. Open cockpit,
Okay.
exposed to the elements, wind whipping past you over 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
The noise is deafening, you're battling turbulence, the temperature can plummet
Oh, yeah.
way below freezing at higher altitudes, and oh yeah, there's the enemy trying to shoot you down.
Yeah, that's a slight problem.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, these guys weren't seasoned combat veterans.
Right. A lot of them were really young.
Yeah, a lot of them were wealthy, educated, elite families, but still learning the ropes.
Learning on the fly, literally.
Exactly. They had to train like crazy, master these new aircraft and the tactics.
Which were always changing.
Constantly changing, yeah.
I was reading about this ritual they had, the bottle of death.
Oh, yeah, that's
Kind of a grim one.
It is after every victory. The squadron would get together, share a bottle of bourbon.
Huh?
But they would leave one glass untouched.
Why?
A reminder that some of them wouldn't be there to share the next one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty heavy reminder of death.
Yeah, you're literally toasting your own mortality.
Wow. So did many of them make it?
The losses were rough.
Okay.
Within 6 months of the escadrille forming, 3 of the 7 founding members were dead.
Wow.
New pilots would come in, but that shadow of death, it was always there.
Always looming.
Yeah. But despite all that, they became quite famous.
I bet their exploits back in the States.
Oh, yeah, they were heroes.
Symbols of American courage and idealism.
That's right.
Even the name Lafayette Escadrille, that's powerful.
It is, honoring the Marquis de Lafayette.
The Frenchmen who fought with the Americans in the Revolutionary War.
Yep, showing that connection between France and America.
A bond forged in battle. What about their emblem?
Oh, yeah, that was something else.
What was it?
A Native American warrior. The fighting spirit of America.
It's crazy how these little details,
The name, the emblem.
their rituals,
It really gave them their own identity.
Americans fighting for France, but totally unique.
Right, and then the U.S. enters the war in 1917, changes everything.
Oh, yeah. Now they have to make a choice.
Stay with the French, where they've built this bond, honed their skills, or join the U.S. Air Service.
Tough decision.
Hmm.
I bet there were some mixed feelings about that.
Oh, for sure. The U.S. Air Service was so far behind the Europeans at that point.
Technology, experience,
Everything. It was a tiny part of the Army Signal Corps at that time. Limited resources.
deep learning curve.
Big time. Some pilots felt joining the U.S. Air Service would be a step back.
Yeah, they'd be sacrificing the competence and camaraderie they'd found with the French.
Exactly.
So it was a gamble for them.
A leap of faith.
Yeah. And on top of all that, there was one pilot who faced another kind of hurdle.
Right.
Eugene Bullard, the only black American pilot in World War I.
That's right. His story is remarkable and heartbreaking.
He was already living in France when the war broke out.
Yeah. Joined the French Foreign Legion, proved himself as a soldier.
And then earned his pilot's wings.
Flew combat missions for France, the whole deal.
But when the U.S. joined, he wanted to fight for his own country.
Of course, but the U.S. Army was segregated back then.
So,
Black pilots weren't accepted.
wow.
It's just awful.
Here's this guy, decorated pilot, fighting for democracy in Europe.
And he's denied the opportunity to do the same for his own country.
Because of his race?
It's terrible, a stark reminder of the racism and prejudice ingrained back then.
Even during a war when everyone's supposed to be fighting for the same ideals.
Exactly, but Bullard didn't give up.
He kept going.
He kept flying for France, facing the same dangers as everyone else.
Oh, his story.
He never officially got an aerial victory.
But
He probably shot down at least one.
maybe 2 German planes.
Yeah,
His persistence in the face of that injustice is incredible.
absolutely.
Yep.
So while Bullard's dealing with discrimination, the U.S. Air Service is struggling too.
They were playing catch-up.
Big time. Starting from scratch, building airfields, getting planes, training pilots.
It must have been a huge undertaking.
Mm,
And the technology's changing so fast.
exactly. They relied heavily on the French for equipment and training.
What kind of planes were they flying?
One was the DH-4 Liberty bomber.
That one rings a bell.
It was known to catch fire in the air.
Oh, no. What do they call it?
The flying coffin.
Yeah, I remember that.
Can you imagine what that did for morale?
Oh, it would be terrible. They're already facing the dangers of combat.
And then they're sent up in these things that are known to burst into flames.
Must have felt like suicide missions.
Totally understandable. But despite all that,
Okay.
the U.S. Air Service, they're determined to make their mark.
They had some good leaders, right?
Yeah, guys like Brigadier General William Billy Mitchell,
Mitchell.
the visionary.
He really understood the potential of air power.
He was ahead of his time, pushing for strategic bombing paratroopers. He was definitely controversial, clashed with other leaders.
Who were stuck in the old ways of thinking.
Exactly, but his ideas
Shaped the future of warfare.
They really did. What about the Lafayette Escadrille? What happened to them?
Yeah, once the U.S. entered the war,
They were absorbed into the U.S. Army.
became the 103rd Aero Squadron.
Yep. Bittersweet moment for those guys.
Finally, part of their own nation's air force, but leaving behind their French comrades.
It was the end of an era. Their legacy lived on, though.
How so?
Their experience helped train new American pilots. And their story is connected to a much more tragic one.
Oh, which one?
The death of Quentin Roosevelt,
Theodore Roosevelt's son.
youngest son.
That's a big name. What happened?
He was only 20 years old when he volunteered.
Wow.
Skilled pilot, full of idealism, wanted to serve his country. But he was shot down and killed behind enemy lines in July of 1918.
Devastating for his family, for the nation.
Absolutely. His death really resonated. It represented the sacrifice of a generation, the loss of potential, the cost of war.
It reminds us that behind all the big stories of war, there are individual stories of courage, loss, and sacrifice.
Exactly.
Stories we need to remember.
We do.
So we've seen how this whole thing started. Aerial warfare.
Yeah, from grenades to the Lafayette Escadrille.
And how quickly technology changed.
And the incredible courage and sacrifice.
Totally changed how wars were fought.
Forever. But it didn't end in 1918.
No, the legacy of World War I aviation, it goes way beyond the trenches in Europe.
Right, it's still with us today.
So what happened to all that innovation?
All those lessons learned.
Yeah, where did it all go?
Well, one of the biggest outcomes was the rise of independent air forces.
So before the war, aviation was just kind of like an add-on to the Army or Navy.
Pretty much. But the war proved that air power could be decisive on its own.
It's like a game changer.
Exactly. Countries realized they needed their own air forces.
Not just some planes tacked onto other branches.
Right. And that led to the creation of air forces all over the world.
Like the U.S. Army Air Forces.
Which became the U.S. Air Force we know today.
Wow, so those early dogfights, they really planted the seeds for modern air power.
They did. And those seeds grew fast. Think about the technology.
You know, like what?
More powerful engines, sleeker designs, better weapons.
It kept evolving.
It did.
Yeah?
And led to the jets, bombers, helicopters we have now.
It's like they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Exactly. The pressure of war pushed people to create.
And those creations changed everything. Like, remember Billy Mitchell?
Oh, yeah, the strategic bombing guy.
And paratroopers.
He was ahead of his time.
Butting heads with the old guard.
For sure. But his ideas, they became the basis for how we fight wars today.
Airborne warfare.
Striking behind enemy lines, deploying troops by air, controlling the skies.
Yeah.
It all came from World War I.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just military stuff, right?
Nope. Aviation changed civilian life, too.
How so?
The war proved air travel was possible.
Even if it was still kind of risky back then.
Yeah, and expensive. But it lit the spark. The dream of commercial aviation.
So those pilots, the ones who came home, they didn't just quit flying.
Many didn't. They became test pilots, instructors, engineers, entrepreneurs,
They helped build the whole industry.
airlines, new aircraft designs, safer travel. They made it happen.
A whole generation shaped by World War I.
Their knowledge, their sense of adventure, they brought it all back and ushered in the age of aviation.
We take air travel for granted now,
We do. But it wouldn't exist without those pioneers.
who risked their lives to explore the sky.
Exactly. It's incredible to think about it, isn't it?
Those rickety biplanes and those brave pilots from World War I.
They helped shape the world we live in today.
It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And the story isn't over.
Huh. What do you mean?
The legacy of World War I aviation, it's still unfolding.
Okay.
We're still figuring out the impact of air power, how to use it ethically, strategically.
It makes you think.
It does. History isn't just the past.
No.
It's still shaping our present and our future.
Absolutely.
If you found this interesting, I'd say keep digging.
Yeah. Learn more about World War I aviation.
There are so many amazing stories out there.
About the people and the events that changed everything.
And if you want to join us for more deep dives, be sure to subscribe.
Yeah, subscribe to The Deep Dive.
We'll be exploring more of the past, present, and future.
We'll see you next time.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep.